So again, welcome to everyone. Thank you for being here on a sunny Saturday. This is our 6th and final class of our Sustainable Yard Care series. And this class is all about managing water on your property. So we'll cover everything from tips for conserving water to instructions for how to install a rain garden. And if you're not sure what a rain garden is at this moment, we'll teach you that too. So yeah, it should be a great class. And in case you don't know me yet, my name is Kristen Covey, and I'm an educator with the King County Wastewater Treatment Division. And I am responsible for facilitating and coordinating all of these classes, but I'm not teaching them. So we have two presenters today.
Now we got berries. I made a fancy quarter.
Hold on one minute. Okay. And we have two presenters today. David Jackson is back. So he was with us earlier in the series, and he is the Community Conservation Program Manager with the Snohomish Conservation District. And I'm excited to introduce a new speaker today, Amelia Barr. She's an employee with the King County Wastewater Treatment Division, and she is the RainWise Program Manager. So she will be teaching us all about rain gardens today. So this class is being recorded, which means it will be available to view later. So feel free to not take notes, and you can definitely have this as a resource later on. I will also be emailing you all of the slides you'll see today in PDF form. So any resources that we include in the slides will be available to you to click on in the PDFs in that email. And just a reminder, this class is best suited for folks that are new to this topic. So we'll be reviewing basic information, but we'll also provide, like I said, a bunch of resources that will allow you to take a deeper dive into some of the more technical details. And so if you are new to this series, if this is the first class that you've joined, that's great, welcome. I just want to provide a little background for everyone. So this series is brought to you through a partnership between the King County Wastewater Treatment Division and the Snohomish Conservation District. And this is our 7th year doing this series. And it has continued to grow and expand, especially in the last couple of years. We've been able to reach literally hundreds of people through this online platform, which has been a silver lining of the pandemic. But normally we do have these classes in person at one of our wastewater treatment plants, which is located just across the county line in Snohomish County. So there's a map on the slide on the left showing you where this particular treatment plant is located. On site is a very beautiful education center, which is the photograph in the center of the slide called Water Center, and that's where we normally hold these classes. So King County Wastewater actually treats wastewater for some Snohomish County residents. And so since we have this lovely education center, we thought it would be a perfect partnership to form with the Snohomish Conservation District to offer these classes, since we share both constituents, community members, and a passion for improving water quality. So on the right part of this slide is all of the other classes that we've offered in the series. This is our last one, but we did record all of the other ones. And what's not on this slide is we did a pre-recorded class this year all about yard design. So that is also available for you to view. And all these videos are located in the same spot online, and I will put that link in the chat soon. All right, so just a quick overview of the King County Wastewater Treatment Division. This map on the slide in the bottom right corner is showing you the service area. So we treat wastewater for about 1.8 million people who live mostly in Western King County, but as you can see, also in South Snohomish County. Cleaning wastewater is obviously our main focus, but we also like to support the community members we serve by offering some free classes and some school programs and community events. So we have a lot of things going on at Water Center typically. So just wanted to highlight that as well. So just some logistics for the class. I just wanted to let you know that we will be using the chat box primarily for communicating. So feel free to use it when the presenters are speaking, and the person who's not presenting will do their best to answer those questions. Today we're going to have a pause kind of halfway through the class to answer any questions from the first half, and then the next presenter will do their section after that Q&A. And we will still probably have about 15 minutes left at the end for more questions. I know that that's a big part of why people like to join live, is to answer or ask questions that we can answer. So we will definitely have plenty of time for that today. And then we are going to ask people to keep their videos off just to decrease the bandwidth of this meeting. I'll let you know that we were having a little bit of some audio issues with one of our speakers. So there are closed caption options at the bottom of your screen. You can, I believe, turn them on if you aren't able to hear. I would also recommend turning up the volume as much as you can, but hopefully it should be okay. Yes, so apologies ahead of time if it's a little hard to hear. Okay. I think I covered everything. I'm going to turn it over to Amelia, and both Amelia and David are going to introduce themselves and start the class.
Thanks, Kristen. Hi, everyone. My name is Amelia Barr. As Kristen said, I work with her over here at King County Wastewater Treatment Division. I'm a program manager for our rainwater program, which provides rebates to private property owners to install rain gardens and cisterns at their private property. But then I also do a lot of outreach and education about other green stormwater infrastructure technologies and different programs. That will all come as a little preview into what I'll cover today a little bit. But yeah, there's various incentives and other programs just kind of trying to teach everybody about these low impact development technologies to better manage stormwater at your homes, businesses, schools, etc. So yeah, I've been with the county for about 2.5 years now. And before that, I worked for a local nonprofit here in Seattle, but my roots are from the East Coast. I saw a few East Coasters, so happy to have you here. Yeah, I'm not sure what else, but just really excited to be here. And thank you to everybody for joining us.
My name is David. I am the program manager for community conservation at the Snohomish Conservation District. We deal a lot with stormwater and rainwater harvesting and control options. If you're in Snohomish County and you have some questions after this, or you want a site visit, please feel free to get in contact with me. For those not familiar with what the Conservation District is, we are free technical assistance to landowners in Snohomish County and Camano Island. So if you live in Camano Island, you'll still come talk to us. And we're working primarily with rural and urban landowners to implement BMPs, or best management practices, for a number of things, most germane to this webinar, stormwater issues. So our talk today is going to be primarily around managing water at home. Collecting water, managing runoff, dealing with stormwater issues at your place of residence, and then other things around smart watering, water conservation. And we're going to give you a lot of resources. We're going to give you some advice. We're going to kind of talk about the issues, and then we're going to give you a lot of stuff to kind of help you on your way. If you do have questions at the end of this, I strongly recommend talking to Amelia or myself. Our contact information will be up at the end and available online. We can give you some more personalized help as well. So what is stormwater? It's a word that we've used a couple times now, and it's not necessarily a common word for folks outside of urban conservation or stormwater management. Stormwater is any water that comes from the sky. Could be called rainwater, could be called snow, any kind of precipitation, stormwater. The other element of stormwater is runoff. So you see here on the right our kind of urban model for modern stormwater. The areas, the majority of our cities are impervious surface. They are surfaces that do not allow for infiltration or water to move through their surfaces and percolate down into the soil. So it creates what we call runoff. Runoff is water that runs off of a surface and into a waterway or a facility. These impervious surfaces usually have pollutants. Those pollutants may be from cars, they may be sediment from roofs, they may be fecal matter from crows and dogs and all sorts of squirrels and everything else. And these pollutants get carried into waterways and then harm our fish habitat. They carry bacteria, heavy metals, all sorts of terrible things we'll talk about in a second. You'll also notice that without water infiltrating into the ground in place, if it's all running off into a waterway, that's happening a lot more and a lot faster than nature kind of intended. So it also causes flooding and erosion. Flooding is obviously not great. We just got through a big round of flooding. I think everywhere in Western Washington was dealing with flood warnings. It also causes erosion because the water is moving much faster and higher volumes. So we all know, bank erosion is a very scary thing, especially here in Washington, and create some real problems. So it's not just pollution, though that is kind of our focus. It's also a question of speed and volume. Of course, both of these are exacerbated by climate change. As the climate warms, our drier seasons get drier and our wetter seasons get wetter, which means that there's more precipitation, more runoff, more flooding, more erosion. I don't want this to be all doom and gloom, so I want to, as we go forward with this, remember this little saying that I always try to keep in mind: stormwater is a problem or a resource. And that's not a question of just how you look at it. That's a question of sometimes it does cause problems, but it can also cause a resource. The folks who said, well, I want to know how to use stormwater at home, we're going to get you covered because it's not all gloom and doom. So I mentioned that we're going to talk about pollutants. Pollutants are kind of the big issue. So pollutants and runoff generate from or come from what we call pollutant generating surfaces. And this is any surface that can collect pollutants and basically stores them on the surface for water to sweep away. Most of these are really easy: sidewalks, parking lots, roads. You think, yep, that's exactly where pollutants would live. Less common ones are things like roofs or even lawns. Birds and crows and stuff land on your roof, and they do their business up there, and that washes right down off your gutters and into the stormwater system and into waterways. Similarly, lawns. A big problem that we have is people not picking up their dog leavings, and stormwater will come and it will wash big chunks of that away. Since turf grass roots so shallow and so densely, water doesn't go as deep as it would in more natural systems. It will run off over the top of turf grass and carry those leavings right with them. So common pollutants are nutrients. Nutrients are dangerous and problematic because they cause a number of issues, including algal blooms in waterways. Basically throws off things like the pH balance. It throws off the biochemistry of the waterways, and it makes it harder for the plants and animals that rely on that biochemistry to live there. Metals, things from brake pads, rust, all sorts of stuff. Heavy metals are the ones that we really care about, but all kinds of metals will have issues. These are primarily coming from roads and parking lots. If you're wondering, well, I don't own a parking lot, how can I do that? Quick advice for you: park your car inside. It'll help. Bacteria coming from fecal coliform, as well as some other sources. Bacteria nutrients actually also come from lawn care. So if you're using a lot of fertilizer, or if you're using a lot of pesticides and things like that on your lawn, that could be contributing to some poor biochemistry down the line. Sediment, which is just things like sand, tiny little grits of things. This usually comes from, this comes from all over the place. Roofs and asphalt are some of the most common ones. Hydrocarbons, so the most common of those are plastics and oil. You can imagine where those ones are coming from. And then the nebulous but very important for policy reasons, toxics in fish. Some of you may have heard of the recent research into coho die-off with a molecule from tire rubber. I won't bore you with the rest of that, but that is a great example of toxics in fish. It's an element from the tire rubber that is coming off in impervious paved surfaces, washing into waterways and harming our salmon.
Almost missed the unmute button. Yeah, so stormwater also, one issue that we see in a lot of within the city of Seattle, but really in a ton of different cities and more developed areas throughout our country, stormwater leads to what's called a combined sewer overflow. So a lot of cities will have a combined sewer system. We have this throughout Seattle, and what that means is that the pipes that are going from your home and getting rid of all of your wastewater combine into a large pipe where all of your stormwater is also discharging into. So it's kind of what becomes a mixture of both your wastewater and your stormwater, all comes together in one combined pump on its way to head into different wastewater treatment facilities to get cleaned and discharged and all of that stuff. So when we have these really big rainstorms and rain events, what will happen is that we will have overflow incidents. So here on the slide, there's two different graphics. On the left is what a combined sewer system will look like on a dry day where everything's functioning properly. So you'll see everything is great, everything's just moving along towards the treatment plant. But when we get our big rain events, what will happen is so much stormwater will enter the system and will overwhelm the system, and water will discharge out into what I like to call kind of emergency exit points of outfalls. So the water will discharge into local bodies of water, and it's designed that way because otherwise it would back up into homes and businesses, and we really don't want that happening. That would be a huge problem. But we also don't want this water discharging into local water bodies. So what we want is a solution for managing stormwater on site so that these overflow incidents happen at a much lower frequency than they are happening, in our super wet months. So how are we going to work towards that solution? So what we want to do is transition our more developed areas where we have a lot of those impervious surfaces that David was talking about, and make it function in a way that mimics our old forests that used to be here. So how can we transition this developed area to function a lot more like a very natural landscape? One way to do that, and I love this graphic, I'm going to thank David and the Snohomish Conservation District, because this is the first time I saw this. Instead of pave it, pipe it, and pollute it, what we want to do is slow it, spread it, and sink it. So I really like that because that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to take that water that's falling on our different properties and we want to slow it down. We want to spread it out, and we want to sink it back into the groundwater. And one way of doing that are the different low impact development, green stormwater infrastructure technologies that we're going to cover today. And what's great is that you can be part of the solution. Individual homeowners, private property owners can play a huge role in solving our stormwater problem because they have so many options out there to help manage the rain and the stormwater that's showing up on their site specifically, and keeping that out of keeping that stormwater out of the system and out of water bodies and reducing pollution. So thank you all for being here, because you really are going to be a major part of our solution.
So one of the things that the other half of managing stormwater well as a natural resource is also managing your own water consumption. This is a question we get a lot, not just how do we manage the large amount of water that we have, but how do we manage the scarcity of water that we have from our natural from our lakes and streams that we're harvesting from. So here's four very quick rules. The first one is avoid water when it's raining. The picture unfortunately did not upload at the best resolution, but that is one of my favorite photos of, by favorite photos, I mean those heartbreaking photos of a school with its sprinklers on full blast while it is pouring rain. If it's raining, you don't need to water. Go ahead and leave the sprinkler in the garage. Try to water in the morning or the evening. either one, try to water when it's cooler. That, especially if you're overhead watering, that will reduce the amount of evaporation and will increase your efficiency. Know when your plants need water. If your plants are dormant, they likely don't need as much water, and you can scale your water accordingly. And then know where your water comes from. If you are taking from a stream, if you're taking from a dam, if you're taking from a well, be aware of that. Talk to your municipality and understand when water resources are going to be most critical. And then next, we're going to talk a little bit about some low flow and sustainable irrigation, which is the fifth element of water conservation. Never mind, we're not going to talk about that next. We're going to talk about alternatives to lawns next. Somebody had mentioned in the chat, I believe Rachel was her name, that we wanted to look at, they wanted to talk about some other ways to conserve and preserve water in your landscape without just storing it or having it run off. Native landscaping is one of the easiest ways to do that. Native plants are very good at adapting to our climate cycle, our precipitation cycle, and they're also very good at regulating the precipitation of other plants. They all evolved here together. They know the cycles. They understand how to kind of work together. Along with native landscaping comes wildlife and pollinator gardens. If you are interested, like a lot of people are, which is wonderful about supporting native pollinators, there's a number of plants, native plants that you can use that do a great job in your yard, supporting those native pollinators everywhere from butterflies to bees to hummingbirds. Rain gardens, which Amelia is going to talk about here in a second, are another great way to conserve water, not just infiltrate it and clean it and help with getting it back into the soil, but also preserving it and putting it to use in a very helpful way. Another way is backyard prairies. Prairies are adapted to a drier cycle, so they have a lot of great ways to store water deeply, release it when they don't need it, and they take significantly less water. And then a way that takes more water but can be used for, but edible gardens use a lot more water, but can also benefit from stored and filtered waters, which we'll talk about here in a second. You'll also notice that all of these are alternative to lawns. Lawns, I don't want to just bash on lawns because they do have some good uses, but lawns are, they generally take significantly more water, they take significantly more care, they're impervious surface, and they often lead to, they are pollutant generating surfaces as well. They usually lead to things like bacteria and different toxins entering waterways. So if you're thinking, I really hate mowing, I don't know if I want to do this, any one of these options would be well, almost any one of these options. Edible gardens are a lot of work, but the rest of these options would be significantly less work and would be much better uses of your lawn space. So low volume irrigation, all of these can be done with stored water. There's kind of three general ways to do it. The first one is drip irrigation. Drip irrigation uses the tiniest amount of water and these little things called emitters to deliver just the right amount of water to just the very top of the soil around the plant's roots. It usually has a lot of math and timing involved, but it is also the lowest amount of water that you can possibly deliver. It's a very efficient way to do watering. Watering spikes are much lower effort, but they use a similar approach. You attach a bottle to the top of the spike. You put the spike into the ground right next to the plant's roots. When the soil around the plant becomes saturated, there's no more air for the water to move into. So the bottle stops depleting. And then as that dries out or taken up by the roots, more air becomes available and more water moves in. That is just about knowing how much water your plants are going to need and then making adjustments on the bottle. Soaker hoses are probably the easiest out of all of these. They're just a hose that leaches water out from the sides. You wrap it around the plants you want and you turn it on. Soaker hoses are actually what I would recommend if you are looking at edible gardens. They're really, really cheap and easy to maintain. All of these can be done with captured water as well, but they will require a little bit of filtration to make sure that you're keeping sediment out of them. Sediment will absolutely ruin drip irrigation emitters. It won't ruin soaker hoses as effectively and easier to clean, but if you want to be really precise, you still want some kind of filter, sediment catch filter. So I mentioned earlier that you can either see rainwater as a problem or a resource. The problems obviously are flooding, pollution, standing water, damp soils. Flooding, as we mentioned, pollution, as we mentioned, standing water can be a real problem, especially if it starts breeding mosquitoes or if it's creating a stagnant area, depending on how much standing water you have. And damp soils are a problem for a number of things, from getting your car stuck in them to always being muddy to just not being able to plant stuff there. And those are sort of the things we tend to think about. It's like, well, I have this yard and it's wet and soggy and snotty. I don't know how to manage that. If you're looking at that, also consider that the reason that you're having these issues is the abundance of water, and think, well, I wonder what I could do I wonder what I could do with an abundance of water to improve what I want. Maybe you don't want a lawn there. If it's a nice wet spot that's really damp and it makes the grass always terrible, some native plants could go there. That gives you landscape diversity. If the issue is that water, you aren't connected to the stormwater system, so water is running out into your yard, it ends up in a big standing pool. That's a great spot for some storage. Store that water and go use it somewhere else. If the issue is that you have an area that's too much water and it's soggy and snotty, you have another section of plants that are not getting enough water, and you go, oh my gosh, this is so annoying. Storage and irrigation. You're constantly going, I hate watering this stuff. I hate native plants are so needy. How come my roses are always? Yeah, absolutely. Roses are like a Ferrari. They're beautiful and they do one thing specifically, but they're not at all robust. So get yourself a rain barrel, store it up in the wet season, let it fill up, and then don't use municipal water. Don't use well water through the rest of the summer. Water your roses with rainwater. You can have the yard that you want. Keep it dry. Keep the lawn section open, nice and dry and usable, while still having the plants that you want. It's not just about attitude, because rainwater is always both things. It's always both a problem and a resource. And sometimes it's just a problem and you just have to figure out how to deal with that problem. But I do encourage you, if you're frustrated by something, consider what you could use the water for. So I've harped on a couple times about rain catchment. Rain catchment is exactly what it sounds like. It's about catching rain, storing it for long periods of time. By long periods of time, we mean up, something anywhere from a few days to a few months, and then using that water somewhere else. Rain barrels are the most common version of this. We have this lovely shot of rain barrels over here on the right. Full disclosure, that is not how I would build that assembly, but it's the best kind of example of all of the pieces together that I can find. Those are the most common, the big blue barrels you see around. They're very easy to put together. They divert water from your downspout, store them in a system, and then there's this overflow and a spigot. The spigot is when you want to drain the water out to use it. The overflow is in case the system becomes overloaded. Cisterns are larger, generally more expensive, sometimes buried, sometimes not. If you're looking for something that is really custom, you don't feel like rain barrels really fit what you're doing, or if you want something really pretty, I have installed $10,000 cistern systems that are absolutely gorgeous.
Wow.
And they make I don't know who's unmuted, but wow, indeed. They're very, very expensive, but like they made the house look even more beautiful, if you can imagine that. Just absolutely incredible. They are more expensive, but if you're looking to store a lot of water, they're absolutely the best, the best method. We have people, especially in Snohomish County, who are doing small small scale agriculture or homesteading, and they will pipe water from their barns or roofs, and they have to have 5,000 gallon capacity. A 55 gallon rain barrel is not going to do it. Filtration. There's kind of three major steps that you can do for filtration. If you were to, the last one is hypothetical because I can't recommend that you do it. The first one is a sediment filter, and that's just going to stop sediment from getting into out of the spigot. Ideally, you're building the system in such a way that there is a sump, which is a distance between the bottom of the barrel and the spigot level. When water gets in, the sediment will settle to the bottom, and then you'll be pumping out clean water. If you want to go an extra step and reduce turbidity, you can attach a small sediment trap filter on your spigot that will stop water from that will catch sediment as it exits the spigot. You'll need to clean it out every once in a while, but it's very effective. The next step, and I do suggest this if you are using it for root vegetables, or if you are watering livestock like chickens or rabbits, is a charcoal filter. And a charcoal filter is similar to a Brita filter. It's going to capture a lot of heavy metals and pathogens. A lot of, not all of, but it will capture a lot of them. And then the water you're getting out will be significantly cleaner. If you are concerned about the quality of water that you are going to use for any kind of food irrigation or to water livestock, strongly suggest getting your water tested. You can do so at Home Depot. They have little I'm not paid by Home Depot. This is the first hardware store that I thought of. But you can get just very quick water tests. You can also go to UW Labs or WSU Labs or any of the WSU extensions and bring in water samples, and they'll be able to test it for pathogens. In certain areas, I strongly recommend doing this because anyway, I will leave it at that. If you are concerned at all, I strongly recommend getting your water tested. The third and hypothetical filtering system is a UV filter. That will reduce pathogens even further. It's not strictly necessary unless you really want to just kind of go overkill. If you're interested in that, I'm a big nerd about it, so I'm happy to talk about it, but I'm not going to go too much further into that. If you're going to, some potential uses of this, gardens, including just your native gardens. If you're going to use native gardens, you don't really have to filter it that much. The plants are used to it. They'll be okay. If you're going to do edible gardens, the soil is going to filter a lot of it, but you may want to put a charcoal or sediment filter on just to get some extra stuff out. Small livestock, rabbits, chickens. We've had some people do goats before. Again, sediment charcoal filter. And then always check your local regulations. Local, depending on where you're coming from, the information that I'm giving you, I'm giving you the proper information for Washington State and Snohomish County. It may not be appropriate where you live. So reach out to your local municipality, or if you're in the United States, your local conservation district. It also may be called either a soil conservation district or a soil and water conservation district. Reach out to them, see if they have any resources for you as well. So rain barrel installation, very, very simple. If you have a rain barrel, we're going to install it today with these 4 steps. You can do it on this webinar if you really want to. You just have to rush because I'm about to start talking. Choose a spot. You want the spot to be fairly near whatever you're going to be using it for. So if you're going to be using it for native gardening, you want it to be near that native planting area. You want it to be above that. The higher it is, the more head pressure you are going to get, meaning the more pressure in the water is going to come out with. And the more pressure, the better, especially for things like drip irrigation, soaker hoses. You'll have a minimum pressure that you want to get through in order to force it out of those emitters and pores. And then you also want it to be next to a downspout because you don't want to divert the downspout too far over. You'll also lose pressure that way. You want it to be as close as possible. So those are your siting criteria. You want it to have a solid base. I suggest digging about 4 inches down, putting down some gravel, and then leveling cinder blocks on it. I say leveling cinder blocks. I mean, make sure the cinder blocks are very level, and then put the barrel on top of that. Once Once barrels get full, they're very, very heavy. Most of them are around 55 gallons. Water is 8.3 pounds per gallon. You can do the math. These things get extremely heavy very quickly. Which is great when they're full and they're level, because they will hold themselves in place. It's hard to move them. If they're not level, if they're tipping one way or the other, they become very dangerous. And if they fall sideways, they'll break your downspout diverter, possibly break the barrel in your emitter, and you need to go back and do a lot more work. So good, solid base. Downspout diversion, this can be as easy as, there's a couple different ways to do this. You can actually just cut your downspout and move the downspout to directly over the barrel, and it'll go right in. You can also buy a downspout diverter, which attaches to your downspout and is a pipe running into the rain barrel itself. Those will sometimes come with a first flush diverter. I don't know how strictly necessary those are, especially if you're cleaning your barrels regularly and filtering the water. The other thing that you can do, and I want to be careful with how I say this, if you are a renter, you can take out the screws from the top of your downspout, and you can hang a chain from the top of your downspout to the barrel. The water will follow the chain. It's actually called a rain chain. The water will follow the chain down and go into the barrel. This is critically important because then when you move out, you can take the chain off, put the downspout back, and everything is left as it is. You should always talk to your landlord before you do this to make sure that they're okay with you modifying the place that you're renting. But if you're renting in a place and thinking, well, I can't build a rain garden, this is a way that you can still do some rainwater mitigation. And then lastly, place your overflow. The overflow should be at the very top of the barrel, and you can always connect it to a piece of hose, and then basically find a spot that you don't mind getting some extra water. So you'll attach a hose to a spot out in your yard somewhere and just run it out there, and the water will go through and out the hose to wherever it's supposed to go. Alternatively, you can just leave. If you don't feel like it's going to overflow, you're going to use the water a lot, you don't have to connect a hose. You can just have it right there, but just be aware that wherever that hose comes out, if we get a really heavy rain event and that barrel fills up, right below that overflow is going to be very, very wet.
That is actually the end of your section, David. So thank you so much for all of that information. That was kind of a lot. But the good thing is we have extra time for some questions before we segue into Amelia talking about rain gardens. So there were a few that came up in the chat box that we wanted to ask you, David. Actually, we think that a conservation district person would be a good person to answer this question of someone who has a drainage ditch in front of their house that the water looks pretty clean. There's salamanders in it. They even see people harvesting greens. Can that person pump some of that water for irrigation?
Ooh,
yeah.
First off, congratulations on salamanders. My first response is that you need to talk to your municipality. Technically, I don't know if I would see a problem with it. I think I might still want to test the water. If it's a drainage ditch, you might be getting a lot of things that you can't see. The water could look clean and still not be clean. Even low turbidity water can have some challenges with it. But regardless of what you can do technically, I think you would want to talk to your municipality and see how that area is regulated. We've had a thing cropping up recently where some previous irrigation some irrigation and drainage passages, because they are connected to salmon spawning areas, are actually considered protected habitat. And you don't want to go modifying protected habitat. I find that kind of unlikely. It's been a few rare cases, but I would suggest talking to your municipality first, just to make sure that you're fully in the clear. You can also, if you're in King or Snohomish County, there are mapping software, websites online that you can go look into. Basically like what critical area sections are, and like look at your parcel and see what else is going on around that.
Okay, great. And then there was another question about alternatives to lawns. So this person was wondering, what about a clover or grass mix? Are there any other more helpful alternatives?
Yeah, I didn't get into specific alternatives to lawns because I honestly I thought I was running way behind, so I was rushing a little bit to catch up. So clover is if you want a big green area that is healthy and nutrifies soil and does not require as much maintenance as a lawn, clover is probably your best bet. A friend of mine absolutely hates their lawn, but and hates mowing, but needs a large area for their dogs to run around. And I seeded the whole area with white clover. And it's a great pollinator support. It fixes nitrogen, so it's helping your soil if you do eventually want to do some native planting. And it doesn't require nearly as much or as often mowing.
Great. Okay. And then someone said they stopped using soaker hoses in the vegetable garden because they heard they were made from recycled tires. Is that correct?
I saw that, and I almost jumped over and was like, no, stay on target, Red 5. Like I didn't want to go. That was true at some point. Most of the soaker hoses you go and look for will tell you what their rubber provenance is. Most of them do not use rubber anymore. They use a kind of synthetic high wear poly that does not shed nearly as much for exactly that reason. I have heard the same thing, so I think there's probably a point at which they were used. People were like, recycled tire rubber, this is environmentally friendly, without realizing how really bad recycled tire rubber is. So yeah, I had heard the same thing, but if you go and look them up, they should tell you exactly what they're made of.
Great. And then let's see, someone was asking about rain barrels and where they could buy some that are a little bit more cheap because they're very expensive, the large ones.
They are. So I can't, as a member of the government, I can't make any recommendations. We're very, very specific on that. There used to be a time where I could just say, we'll contact the Snohomish Conservation District and we'll get you hooked up because we were basically the cheapest rain barrel game in town. I can't do that anymore because we're getting hit by the same supply chain issues that everybody else is. Mm-hmm. So I don't have rain barrels as available as I would like to. If you, okay, I can tell you 2 places that I have used in the past. These are not explicit endorsements. I'm not telling you to go talk to these places, but these are 2 places that I have used in the past for my friends trying to find rain barrels. The first one is called Container Exchange. It's sort of like a Craigslist where people will have containers and post them up, and you buy them in lots and things like that. That's a little bit of a buyer beware because you don't really know what you're getting. They don't post provenances for like what the barrels were used previously. So you have to be really careful, but you can also get basically on a listserv and set your parameters and you might get lucky. More reliable, but still a little bit on the expensive side, is an organization called Blue Barrel, and they specifically repurpose old food grade barrels. They typically work in smaller lots, somewhere between 5 to 10. But again, if you sign up with them and kind of keep your eye on it, you might get lucky. The only other thing I'll say is that there are some places that that move stuff around, like distilleries and breweries and restaurants that use barrels. And if they aren't able to recycle them, such as if they're doing 1 or 2 at a time, you might get lucky with one of them. But that's kind of the same thing that's happened with pallets. I used to go get pallets all the time for spare wood, and now making like pallet furniture and stuff is really popular, and so they don't do that anymore. And you can recycle them and everything. So It's not as much of a resource, but those are 3 rough possibilities to go look.
Great. Okay. Thanks, David. Yeah. So there was one more question, which is a perfect segue into the second half of the class about installing a swale and if that would be a good solution to deal with pooling standing water in their garden when it rains. And the answer is yes. And that's what the next part of the class is going to talk about is what to do if you have some, standing water in your yard, or if you want to divert some of your roof water into your property instead of putting it into the stormwater system. We're going to learn all about how to build a rain garden in your yard. So I will turn it over to Amelia.
Thanks. Yeah, actually, we're going to jump right into that. So quickly, we'll just kind of go over what is a rain garden, since today might be someone's first exposure to what a rain garden is. So this slide is showing a graphic that kind of goes over the cross section of a rain garden, because a rain garden is a landscaped feature that collects, absorbs, and filters stormwater runoff from your rooftops, your driveways, patios, and other impervious surfaces that we've been talking about, and allows that water to soak back into the ground and infiltrate back in there. So rain gardens are sized to accommodate temporary ponding. Like, these are not going to be pond features. I get that question a decent amount, is like, oh, can this be a pond and should I put fish in it? And the answer is no. Nope, this is not meant to be a permanent ponding element of your yard. It's just for temporary holding water. And basically rain gardens, they can be shaped and sized to fit your yard. They're going to have a very specific soil mixture. It's a bioretention soil mixture. So it's not just any soil that you're going to be able to put into that. And then also rain gardens can really be a way to get really creative and personal with the plantings in your yard. They can be landscaped with a variety of plants to fit your surroundings. So that's just a quick little overview, and then we'll get a little bit more into the whys and the hows. So why install a rain garden? Rain gardens are a great way to get your yard acting more like a mature forest. It's a really great resource to redivert some of that water that's falling on the hard surfaces of your yard and getting it and directing it into this rain garden and then getting it back into the groundwater. Rain gardens can in some cases reduce flooding on neighboring property and in your own yard, and also reduce erosion in streams by absorbing that runoff from hard surfaces. It basically just will increase the amount of water that soaks into the ground to recharge your local groundwater. Also, rain gardens can result in less lawn for you to mow. If you have a really big yard and you're tired of mowing it all the time, a rain garden could be a great way to reduce some of that. Rain gardens are really great for enhanced landscaping and appearance of your yard. They are a natural filter, so they'll filter out oils and greases from driveways, and also filter out some pesticides and fertilizers from lawns and other pollutants before they reach their groundwater. So really helping to reduce the amount of pollution that's ending up in our more natural areas. They are great for wildlife habitat. Like, all the plants that you choose, they can really support pollinators and other local wildlife. And in some cases, rain gardens can increase your property value, especially if it really beautifies your yard. So not only can it be super functional, it can, from an environmental standpoint, but it can also really increase the value of your home if you're looking to sell at any point. Okay, that was a quick little pitch, and some of you may have come into this already knowing you want to build a rain garden, and some people are like, oh, I'm not really sure. So we're gonna get into a surface level overview of how to actually install a rain garden, because it is something that you can do yourself. There are many contractors out there who have become experienced in installing rain gardens. So if you have the means to hire a professional contractor to do it, great. But also, if you are garden expert, love doing things yourself, rain gardens are something that you can install on your own. And I'm going to point you to the Rain Garden Handbook for Western Washington. It is basically going to be the document to use as you start to plan out a rain garden and build. It has chapters for planning, designing, building, and then maintaining, because rain gardens do need to be maintained once they are installed. So a link is here on the slide, but as Kristen's mentioned in the chat, you will be getting a PDF copy of these slides. So this link will be available to you later on. But yeah, this guide is really going to go very in depth about how to install a rain garden on site. So the first thing that you need to consider is finding the right place for your rain garden. There's a lot of different considerations that you're going to need to take into account as you're thinking about where to place your rain garden on your site. I'll get into those in just a second. But basically, you need to look for a place where water actually can be delivered into the rain garden. You got to think about where water is flowing from your roof, from the driveway, from other areas, from neighboring properties. So thinking about where to put that rain garden, like where water is already kind of flowing in your yard. Rain gardens can be placed in more than one location. So this little graphic is showing a rain garden on 2 different sides of the houses. You don't have to have just one rain garden. If you have the space to have a rain garden in your front yard and in your backyard, and you divert half of your roof area to one and half of your roof area to the other, that's great. It does not have to be one rain garden for your property. You can split it up and make smaller ones and just divert specific areas of your roof and your driveway into their own individual rain gardens. So as I was saying, some pre-construction considerations as you're trying to find the right place for your rain garden. First is, do not put it close to your home. Make sure that you're at least 10 feet away from any building foundations, both yours and your neighbors, if you have a neighbor who's really close to a lot line, because all this water being collected in this area, you don't want to risk any foundational damage. So make sure that you are further away from your foundation. Also, utilities. Before you start digging, make sure to find out where your utilities are. You can call 811. It's the know what's below, call before you dig. So you just don't want to, I don't know, hit anything electrical or anything like that. So you might have a spot where you're like, oh, this is perfect. But if there is some sort of utility under there, that's going to be a nightmare for you. So definitely find out where your utilities are before you start to dig. Steep slopes. Rain gardens and slopes really don't work well together. What you're going to want to do is make sure that if you're building on or near a slope, it is less than a 10% slope. This little graphic here kind of shows how to calculate that out. And then if a rain garden is within 50 feet of a slope that is more than 10%, you're might want to talk to a geotechnical engineer or another professional to figure out like, oh, is this actually going to be a right place? Because we want to make sure that we're not causing any landslides or extra erosion, or trying to use these to prevent erosion. So you don't want to put this somewhere where then you're just going to exacerbate that problem. Septic tanks. If you have a septic tank on site, know where that is. You do not want to dig into that when you're building a rain garden, and you have to kind of space your rain garden. I think it's at least 50 feet away from your septic tank. I think the book goes into that, so I guess I don't have to give you that exact number. But yeah, you have to think about your septic tank that's also on site. Poor drainage and high groundwater. Low spots that don't drain that well. These areas may be helpful for naturally slowing and storing stormwater on your property, but those poorly draining depressions will not support rain garden plants very well. Also, where there's high groundwater during the winter, if that groundwater rises to within 1 foot of the bottom of your rain garden, you should consider another location. High groundwaters can be a sign for poorly draining soils, which is not great for placing your rain garden over. And I'll talk a little bit more about that soon if you don't know how to figure out if your soils are going to drain well or not. Existing vegetation, take that into account. You don't want to cut down a big, gorgeous, mature tree to fit a rain garden. So maybe created a shape or size, like a shape or a size, so that you can incorporate that big tree into your landscape. And also wells. Rain gardens should be set back a minimum of 100 feet from water wells. So those are kind of some of the big considerations to think about as you're trying to find the right spot for your rain garden. How do you know if that spot, then you find a spot and you know, like, okay, yes, this is perfect. I'm going to put my rain garden here. I think it's going to work out really well. What you're going to want to do next is test your soils. This graphic here is an example of an infiltration test. This is something that you're going to want to do to figure out if the soils in your yard and where you're going to place your rain garden will support your rain garden. So it requires you to kind of like dig a test hole, fill it with water, and measure how quickly that water is infiltrating back into the ground. If you're finding that the drainage rate is less than 0.1 inches per hour, you don't have the best soil for a rain garden to go in that area. For example, clay. We have a lot of clay in certain areas. Clay is a terribly it's terrible at infiltrating water. So if you have super clayey, clay dense soil, a rain garden is not going to be the right option for you, just because it just, all that water sits and soaks there, and it's going to be a big problem. So you're going to look for soils that are draining at a higher or infiltrating at a higher rate than that. Sizing your rain garden. Once you've tested the drainage rate of your soil and you want to figure out your size, there's basically 5 questions that you really need to ask yourself before you figure out the size of your rain garden. You need to figure out how well your soil drains. So you've already done that. Great. How much area is actually going to drain into your rain garden? So how much water are you actually diverting into that? How much rainfall does your location receive? And I'm going to show a cool chart, at least for Western Washington, on how to figure out where that is. How much water do you actually want your rain garden to hold, like to temporarily pond? And then how much room do you actually have in your yard for a rain garden? So if you're going to need a rain garden that's a certain size, but your yard can actually support that size rain garden, then you want to consider, okay, here's the maximum size of my rain garden. Let me figure out a smaller amount of volume of water to divert from impervious surfaces. So you're going to have to find that balance of how much water can your rain garden actually support and take on before you just have a giant pond overflowing all over the place. So also in that guidebook, this is the chart I was talking about. You'll be able to find your region with a map, and it'll actually help you figure out how much rainfall you're getting and help you figure out your ponding depth. That's how much water, the ponding depth is like the height at which how much water is actually going to fill in and temporarily stay in there. So again, really great resource to kind of figure that out. Designing your rain garden, there's a couple other things. Your inflow right up here is how you're actually going to be diverting that water into the rain garden. So a lot of people will have like, from their roof, they'll have their downspouts, and then you kind of build a trench with some pipe and the rock to get that water right into your rain garden. Also similar to what David was covering with rain barrels and cisterns is an overflow. In our wet months, like your rain garden will probably fill and that water is going to want to go somewhere else. So that overflow is really going to help you direct the water away from your rain garden, away from your home, and make sure that it's like, if more is going to flow out, it's not going to a place where you don't want it to go. And then, again, the rain garden is a bowl shape. So you have to consider, what is your slope going to be in your cross section? It's not just like a square right into the middle of your yard. You're going to have to consider the different sloping angles, and like there's the dimension of the top of the mixture and then the actual like containment area. So really figuring out all of those little nuances as you're planning out your rain garden. And then this slide is kind of just showing how rain gardens don't all have to be a uniform shape. You can really design it to be like a fun shape or work with the space that you actually have. So these are just 2 little schematics to show how you can get really creative with how you want to size and shape your rain garden. Or you can keep it round and keep it simple. And then this is just a cross section again of kind of showing how those inflows and overflows work. This shows how I was saying there's like the downspout from your roof and then goes into a pipe, and then that directs the water into your rain garden. And just so really thinking about that. The next few slides I'm kind of going to run through here covers more of what to expect construction to look like, but we're not gonna, I don't want to spend too much time on that. Again, that guide will really get into it. But basically for construction, you're going to have to start with actual excavation of your soils and actually digging into your ground, creating that shape, going down the depth that you've already predetermined. These photos show that inflow, that trench that you're going to have to build, and laying the pipe to get that water from your impervious surface and directing it into your rain garden. So these slides show the addition of the soil mix of a rain garden. It's best to add that soil mixture about 6 inches at a time and walk on each layer to like slightly tamp it down. It will eventually settle and all that. So it's like, don't just dump it all in. You're going to want to add it in incrementally. And I keep saying, yeah, it's a good, there's a soil mixture that you want to get. A good rain garden soil mix typically contains about 60% screened sand and about 40% compost by volume. And there's different local vendors that you can actually purchase this soil from. So you can go online and look up who specifically might be selling that type of mixture for your rain garden. Also, you'll be adding some mulch on to your rain garden. So that's what the photo on the left is showing. And then those inflow and overflow areas, it's really important to also then lay down some gravel and some rock to protect those areas from any erosion or anything like that. So yeah, how to construct a rain garden in record time, I guess, and an explanation, but very high level. Again, that guide will really get into the nuances and the details and the calculations that you're going to need. Once you have it constructed, I guess it's the fun start. The fun part kind of starts is actually getting to plant some of the plants that you're choosing out. Because a rain garden is that bowl shaped, there are 3 different zones for planting your rain garden. Zone 1, which is closest to the bottom of the rain garden, is where you're going to want to have plants that don't mind having their roots wet. This is where your ponding is going to happen. So you don't want to put a plant that wants to stay dry and for drought environments down in there. It won't survive. So in zone 1, you want to definitely have like flood tolerant plants. Zone 2 gets a little bit drier. Those are the plants that are going to come up the side of the bowl. There's a little more variety here because you don't have to worry about the wet feet that you get in zone 1. And then zone 3 is on the top edge, and the most garden scale ornamentals are appropriate here because at this point you're kind of out of that ponding area. That's where those plants, it's closer to that of just like a normal garden because it's not on the slopes, it's not in the actual bowl of the rain garden. But what's great is that you can really get creative with your rain garden and what it is that you want to have there. I have a couple examples of planting plans. Here's a sample planting plan for a garden that's going to get a lot of sun. So your yard might get like full sun all day. So what you want to do is choose plants that are going to be happy in the sun all day. And you can see here, this is just kind of like an overview plan of like the different plants that this rain garden was gonna get. There was some Pacific Coast iris. They have a couple, some sedges as well. So you can really get creative and there's a lot of variety that you can get with planting rain gardens. Here is a sample planting plan for a garden that's going to end up in the shade. You might have a lot of all tall trees around your yard. You don't get a whole lot of sun. Shady yards and rain gardens are fine. There's ways to plant your rain garden so that it thrives in the environment that you have. That guide also has an appendix that covers a lot of plants that can be used in rain gardens. However, one of the most important things as you're choosing your plants is to think about the maintenance and how they're going to interact with each other. There's plenty of plants that might take over your rain garden, and you're gonna, if you just leave them alone, you're gonna have to prune certain plants. Trees, I don't know, big trees could completely take over, and you have to think about the root structure. So there is this appendix that has a lot of plant options for you and kind of talks about if they like sun, if they like partial sun, specific zones to consider them in. But really, as you're thinking about it, think about the long-term maintenance and what a mature plant is going, how a mature plant is going to interact with the other plants in your rain garden. So here are a couple before and after photos of yards that then got rain gardens. It's kind of going to show a bit of the, sorry about that, that was weird. It's going to show a little bit of the variety of rain gardens and how you really can get creative and individualize your rain gardens. So here's the first before and after. Here is another one where it has a lot of like flowers. I was going to say that one of the first times I saw this photo, I almost didn't even realize it was a rain garden because you don't see that bowl shape as much. It just kind of looks like a regular garden to me the first time I saw this one. And then here are two others. This one on the right, actually, this home was able to make their entire front yard a rain garden. And yeah, it's just, they got rid of all of that lawn and turned the entire thing into a rain garden. I also wanted to quickly share, there's a new resource out there. So I said maintenance, and it's a question that I get a lot is like, how do I know if my rain garden is actually working? Like, how do I know if it's functioning? Washington State University's Stormwater Center recently came out with this new instructional video. They've also developed a rain garden and bioretention assessment protocol to help folks get out there and monitor and maintain rain gardens. So they just put out this video that kind of goes over what you need to do and the tools you might need to figure out if you have a rain garden now and it's like, oh, is it functioning? Is it working? Like, how do I know if it's doing what it's supposed to do? This resource, it's brand new, really great way to visually see like what it is you need to do to like assess your rain garden and figure out if you have to do any like large scale maintenance, because regular maintenance, you're gonna have to weed out certain plants and it's very similar to regular garden maintenance. But sometimes if there's like a clog or some sort of something, this video will help you determine some of those larger problems. So kind of related to rain gardens, and one other green stormwater infrastructure technology I wanted to share is what's called a Grattix box. People also like to call it a rain garden in a box. So it kind of has the shape and like the form of a cistern, but on the inside it has the same or similar layers of that of a rain garden. So it has the footprint of a cistern, but it has the natural filters of a rain garden. I've seen these popping up a little bit more here in the Seattle area. One place that I've seen it used is actually at commercial properties where you might not have the space for a rain garden, but what they do is they've placed this around their building to collect the roof water and have that direct into a Grattix box so that all of those nasty pollutants that David was talking about get filtered out before that water ends up going into into the wastewater system or out to other water bodies. And then, so yeah, here is a photo of where one of those properties where I saw the Grattix box. And this is a nonprofit that's doing some water quality monitoring to see how well that these Grattix boxes are functioning. So there should look out for more information about those. I'm seeing them getting used and talked about a whole lot more. And I did mention that I was going to share some financial resources. I know there was a question about different grant programs. So here in King County, there is the Rainwise rebate program, which is the program that I am a part of. It is a rebate program, but it's within the city of Seattle, within specific eligible basins. So you can go to the website, check your eligibility to find out if you qualify for a rebate or not. The Rainwise program, also, you do need to work with a contractor to install them. So those are rain gardens, like you would not be able to install them yourself. So what if you go on, you're in King County and you see that you're not eligible for Rainwise? There's also what's known as the Green Stormwater Infrastructure Mini Grants that is run by a nonprofit called Stewardship Partners, and those are available throughout the entire King County Wastewater Treatment Division service area. Grants, you can get rain gardens, cisterns, Grattix boxes, or depaving through that one. So Rainwise just covers rain gardens and cisterns, whereas the mini grants have a couple other projects that are eligible. There is also a new program within King County called the Rainscapes program that is specific for properties within unincorporated King County, and that very similarly eligible projects include rain garden cisterns, depaving, and I think tree planting, and that's kind of more set up as a cost share program, and the county has a crew come out and do the construction of those systems for you, and they'll actually take over maintenance of those for the first year. So that's a new program. And then in Snohomish County, David mentioned Snohomish County, or Snohomish Conservation District's cost share program and some technical assistance. And then if you're calling in from not King County or Snohomish County, or these programs aren't a good suit for you, there is a page on the 12,000 Rain Gardens website that has a full list of incentive programs that extend beyond just these. So, Kirkland has a program themselves, Kitsap County has different programs. So that would be a great website to go for other incentive programs for rain gardens and cisterns and other green stormwater infrastructure technologies.
A similar list of programs and resources. 12,000 Rain Gardens is wonderful. Stewardship Partners is regional as opposed to municipal, which can help folks that don't quite fit into one spot or another. In Snohomish County, we have SCD technical assistance. Please do reach out to us with any questions. We really like being the first place that people call to kind of answer questions when you don't know what to ask. We do a lot of this. Our Snohomish County also has a rainscaping program that has a lot of great resources. And then similarly, there are lots of municipal programs. Many cities either have a rain garden kind of lottery in Snohomish County, or they have a rebate program where if you want to build one, they're happy to reimburse you. In King County also has an unincorporated incentive program and a rainscaping program. Amelia, of course, is better expert on Rainwise than I will ever be. And then I happen to know that, especially in West King County, there are a number of municipal rebate programs as well.
I think that, yes, that is the official end of the presentation. So thank you, Amelia and David, for all of that information. And we do have time for some more questions. So there were a few in the chat box that I'm going to start with, but feel free to keep asking more. So there was somebody who asked for any other ideas for a neighbor's direct piped runoff into their yard next to their well on the property line, maybe 150 feet from lakefront. That might be a question for David.
My suggestion, be very careful with whatever you're discharging into the lake. But my suggestion would be to try to find an area that could soak it up either in your backyard or in some kind of buffer. A lot of times there's a particularly thirsty plant or area in someone's yard, like rhododendrons, or rhododendrons always need water. And a lot of people have them installed. We will suggest people kind of guide their path so that in the event that it does overflow, and rain gardens don't overflow that often, but in the event that it does, it goes directly to a plant that will be able to soak that up.
Okay. Amelia, feel free to jump into if you have anything to add to any of these questions. Let's see, there was another one. Does a rain garden have to be 10 feet from a fence as well? That'd be for Amelia.
Yeah, so you should look into, again, this kind of talks about like municipal code and like what is, like there definitely are certain codes that talk about these green stormwater infrastructure projects and how far away from lot lines they can be. I'm not exactly sure how far it should be. For example, even a cistern, I know in the city of Seattle of a certain size has to be at least 3 feet away from your lot line. So I think it can, that's specific to a cistern. So I think it really depends on where you live, but you know, some of the examples I showed did have rain gardens going kind of close to the edge of their property. So I feel like they can get pretty close up to the fence. I don't think they need a whole 10 feet, but also I will say fences, especially if you have a wood fence, could be a concern of pooling water so close to a wooden fence and that post kind of deteriorating or decaying over time. So I have no exact science about like, oh, your fence will deteriorate and whatever, but you know, just a consideration. David, do you have something to add?
I was going to say, I can't speak towards any of the regulation portion of this, but from a technical aspect, you do want to keep it back from anything that has a foundation, that if the foundation shifted, it would be bad. So the number one that we get, the house one is very obvious and people tend to work in that really well, but then people want to put them right next to retaining walls. And no, don't put them next to retaining walls because for the exact same reason, the foundation will erode, the wall will come down. So what Amelia said, I think is exactly what I was going to say is if it's going to be up close to any kind of built structure, consider how the ground being wetter than normal is going to affect that structure.
And then what do you think of rooftop gardens or green roofs to slow down the rainwater?
I mean, I'm a fan. However, there's some major engineering barriers for a green roof. I think it's a wonderful idea. However, it is a lot of soil, a lot of water, a lot of weight to be added onto your roof. So if you are, you know, living or renting a home similar to the one I am, I could tell you right now, the roof that I am sitting under would not support a green roof. There are huge engineering considerations for that. Again, I think they're wonderful. I think green roofs are also really great in urban areas because there's the urban heat index. I think that they're great for improving air quality, but it's going to be really, really tough. So as an individual in a home without a reinforced roof, I would not recommend it. David, I don't know if you have more to add to that.
That was precisely what I was going to say. They really are an engineering challenge. I've built a couple in my time, and I sound like I'm 80 years old. I've built a couple through the course of my career, and they're very, very cool. But they're expensive because you're bringing in a lot of professional to really put in the work or renovate your house, basically. If they're building in a new space, there's a lot of engineering that goes into them. And they take a lot of work. They're a lot to maintain. So I guess I would say they're really cool and they're extremely helpful, but it matters kind of what you're going to be trying to achieve and how much you want to put into it. but they're wonderful. They're wonderful installations.
Okay, great. So a couple more, let's see. Where can we learn about the performance of Grattix boxes for cleaning stormwater before returning to storm drains?
I will put a link in the chat actually right now. The blog post from the nonprofit Ecos. They have been doing some water quality testing of the water coming out of Grattix boxes at a location in Georgetown. So right now, that's what's coming to mind immediately, just because I work with Ecos on a lot of different projects. So I do know that they have been testing that water that's coming off the roof, going through the Grattix boxes, and then kind of comparing samples. They also have a Grattix box that has an oyster barrel sitting above it. So the water goes through an oyster barrel. Well, it looks like a rain barrel, but it's filled with oyster shells. So the water is going through that first before going through the Grattix boxes. So yeah, oyster barrels are another technology that folks are using to kind of deal with more of the heavy metal pollutants that are coming off of roofs. Sorry, had a blank there on the word.
No worries.
Port of Vancouver are the folks that originally developed the Grattix boxes, and they are also very responsive to email and very open with their data.
Okay. And then let's see. You might have answered this already, but can rain gardens work in areas that have a high water table? Is there a minimum depth for planting these, or can they be pretty shallow? What should be the distance of the bottom of the rain garden? What's the distance be from the bottom of the rain garden to the top of the water table?
That's a loaded question, just because again, it is going to be very site. A lot of rain gardens are going to be very site specific. High water tables will be tough to work with, in my experience. Again, the rain gardens are meant for temporary ponding, not permanent ponding. So if you're going to dig a rain garden and let's say you're trying to divert water from your entire roof, that's going to have to be a pretty deep rain garden, especially because it's recommended to have 6 to 12 inches of a ponding depth. So that right there is already at least a foot deep, and that doesn't take into account the full depth of a rain garden. So it's really going to depend on, just how deep you can dig before you're getting standing water, how much water you're trying to hold within a rain garden. Just the general size of it all. So I feel like I'm giving you a non-answer to this just because I just think that it gets complicated as you take into consideration all the different factors of how much water you're trying to divert into it, how big your ponding depth is going to be, what the footprint of your yard is that you can actually have to size the rain garden. Because if you have huge amounts of area, you can maybe make it a little more shallow, but again, it's going to be very site specific. David, you can add to that. I know you have a little more experience than me in actually building these systems, so
I wouldn't do it. Not to be overly glib. I will say this is that when someone comes out and asks us to either build a rain garden and we're helping them with a soil test, or we're actually looking to construct a rain garden, one of the few things that fully just disqualify somebody from participating in our program is a high water table. Just because it's not a question of whether or not it will work, overflow, anything like that. It's that if it doesn't work, the outcome is going to be very negative. So it's almost just kind of safer to just look for a different plan. Not to be too discouraging. There are lots of really great plan Bs, I guess is the only thing I would say about that.
I'll even add to that from a more large scale consideration. I know it's there's history of looking into doing like a large scale green infrastructure program within a certain neighborhood in King County, and like green technology. It's like, let's do this. It's going to be great. It's going to green the neighborhood. However, once a geotechnical assessment was done, it was determined like, wow, the ground, the water table here is really, really high. And if we're going to do any large scale green stormwater infrastructure, it's going to exacerbate flooding problems and drainage issues of the neighborhood. So a different route was taken. So that's, yeah, you know, it's tough. Because as David was saying, it's like, yeah, it might work, but if it doesn't work, it's going to be a major problem.
Taking a rain garden out is a rough project. Mm-hmm. It's not technically difficult. It just feels bad to re-excavate and fill in a rain garden.
Okay. Well, it is exactly 11:30, and I think we did answer all of the questions. So thank you to you all. Good luck with your yards, your green spaces, your balconies, whatever it is. It's just great that you're working so hard to try to improve it for yourselves and for the environment. So thank you to everyone.